Chair up a little bit, babe. Push me up. Okay, thank you. Yeah, I got it too.
Oh, yeah, that's fine.
Pull it back.
Yeah.
Hare Krishna, everyone. Thank you for tuning in to this live event presented by the GBC Strategic Planning Team. Our aim is to provide engaging and relevant presentations for our devotee audience. Thanks for joining. And please share these presentations with your friends and be sure to follow this page so you can learn about the wonderful upcoming events. And if you have any questions during this interview program, please share them in the comments section on the chats. So thank you all for joining us. I have the special honor of interviewing today Krsnanandini. My name is Anuttama Das. I am the GBC member and the Director of Communications for ISKCON globally. I have been blessed to be a friend and a colleague and an admirer of Krsnanandini and her husband Tariq and their beautiful band of Vaishnava, saintly young adults now. I can't say kids anymore. And I'm really very, very grateful to be able to be with everybody for this. So a little introduction to those of you who may not know Krsnanandini or a little bit more about it. I will, in the very beginning, put a plug in for a major contribution that her team made previously. And this is Heart and Soul Connections, a devotional guide to marriage, service, and love. I think she's going to tell us more about that later on as we go through our hour together. But I'm going to refer to this for some background information about Krsnanandini. Krsnanandini Devi Dasi is a minister, a Vaishnava minister, a certified family life educator. She has been serving as the president of the Grahasta Vision Team, co-director of the Dasi Ziad Family Institute, and she's a dedicated mother of 10 children. She was raised in a Christian family, later studied Islam, Mormonism, and other religions, and eventually came to commit her life to Vaishnavism. But as we heard last night on an interview with the Tarako station, she's very much a woman of the Global Interfaith Alliance in her appreciation for religious traditions that embraces all of that. So we're going to hear more about that in a few minutes as well. She was initiated on Radhastami, September 12, 1972, by Srila Prabhupada in Dallas, Texas. And she, along with her husband, Tariq, who is a handsome gentleman sitting behind on her left, they've designed and implemented multiple workshops and curriculum related to marriage, family counseling, and youth counseling. And she's also the author of many books. But I'm not going to list all those because then we won't be able to hear from her live by the time I get finished reading all those. I will just mention one other thing, if I get this in front of the camera. This is one book that I have in my library. You may notice that handsome couple that's featured there amongst the four. This is Tariq and Krsnanandini on a book about Cleveland couples that were making a difference in that city. So one of many, many places that her work and her contributions and her spirit has been recognized within the Vaishnava community and outside the Vaishnava community. So she really is a woman who's been appreciated and recognized on many, many fronts. So welcome, Krsnanandini and Tariq. And we understand that some of your kids are there too.
Yes, Anuttama, thank you so much for having us. And I'm so glad that I get the honor privilege of being interviewed by someone as close as you. I'm so grateful that you could find the time to do that. Yeah, my children, as you can see, Krishna Jeevani, Krishna Kumari, Ganga, and we have the young men are right almost here. They'll be here within the next few minutes.
The boys are late. Is that probably something they had a pattern for many years, I would assume. But they're just now coming. Now, I want to highlight, because we're going to talk about your contributions, and I think you might say, I would certainly say, a lot of people would certainly agree, some of the greatest legacies you've given us are sitting right behind you. And I just want to point out, because we may not get a chance to interview all of them in depth, we're going to ask some questions for your kids. But just Krishna Kumari is initiated disciple in ISKCON. Sham Vallabha is initiated disciple in ISKCON. Mohan Moduri has spent some time with you in India for 5 months recently when you were there for an Ayurvedic treatment. Ganga, I think Ganga, that's you on the end, isn't it? Ganga has a PhD in public health. Ganesham, who's going to join us in a few minutes, is a veterinarian, also a graduate of Princeton. Krsnanandini is a teacher of 1st to 5th grade, lives in North Carolina. And here's the others that aren't with us: Radharani, Bhakti, Hari Gorabila, and Vishnu Kiran. Radharani is a member of the Chapel Hill School Board and proudly swore her vows on the Bhagavad Gita, which is important in its own right. Bhakti was given her name by Srila Prabhupada.
Yeah, and she's a police officer in Chicago, Illinois.
My goodness, you have every profession covered in the next generation.
Exactly.
Great, very good. And Hari Gaur is an artist and a writer, lives in New York, and then Vishnu is the youngest child. Probably not a child anymore either from the age. Oh, there comes some of the boys.
Yeah, and I have a surprise.
Hare Krishna.
There's a surprise that just walked in. My, I hate to use the word stepson because he grew up with all the other children, but we have another that just surprised me and flew in last night. I didn't even know it. He's here now, so he should come stand with us. His name is David Tariq Ziad. He was, Tariq brought him in the family when we got married.
Wonderful, wonderful. You know, yeah, I won't share you my joke about the Mormons and how many kids they have. We'll let you explain a little bit later on about how you entered into this big wonderful family. Krsnanandini, I really wanted to start last night. Some of us may have tuned into a class that you gave in Tawako, and one of the devotees that called. Yeah, actually behind you. If you want to pull that curtain over, I think it'd actually be better for everybody.
Okay. Yeah.
That's good. Yeah, that's better. That's better.
One
of the call-in people kind of briefly told the story of how you came to Krishna consciousness, and I've heard it before, and not everyone may know that, but it's a very wonderful, endearing story how your mother came and brought you all. So let's start it out with that, if you could.
Oh, okay. You might have to stop me at some point, Anuttama. This could be long, but we'll try to shorten it. My mother was a very strong Christian lady, but a very strong spiritual seeker. And my grandfather was a Baptist minister. My grandmother was an evangelist. My great aunts ministers all through Pentecostal Baptist. So my mother, being a spiritual seeker, would search out other religions, so that we actually practiced Islam for a while. We practiced Mormonism for a whole year, and then other religions. But all along, somehow the Lord was guiding my mother to find that higher understanding of God. And so one day my brother was downtown Cleveland in front of one of the larger department stores, and he got a Back to Godhead magazine. And he instantly knew, this is my oldest brother, he instantly knew that my mother would get into this. So he didn't show her that magazine. In fact, he kept it for a few months. But then when he showed her the magazine, that was it. My mother connected with Prabhupada sight unseen, gave up her furniture, sold her furniture, gave money to the temple. And at that time, it was Sri Lekha and his wife, Sri Govinda and his wife, Sri Lekha, Prabhupada disciples, who started a storefront in Cleveland. So my mother helped with that, and also my stepfather, Rip Chan. So shortly after that, though, Sri Lekha and Sri Govinda, the leaders in the storefront, were called away, and other devotees were sent. So in the meantime, I was in Chicago, and I was 17, and I had gone to Chicago to go to the University of Chicago on a scholarship. And my mother very wisely came and brought me a Bhagavad Gita. And she didn't tell me much about that. She just told me to read it. And I had never seen any devotees or anything, but when I read the Bhagavad Gita, again, somehow Prabhupada's mercy, it was like the Bhagavad Gita was reading inside of me, and I knew that Prabhupada was my guru and Krishna was God. So by this time I was 19, I had gotten married, and I left Chicago, and there was a friend of mine whose name was Ayantha at the time. She came with me to join my mother in practicing Krishna consciousness in Cleveland. And at that time, my mother was a spiritual teacher, so she had other students. So when she came to Krishna consciousness, she brought the students with her.
Mm.
And now by this time, there was a new regime in the temple, and they had acquired a large mansion, and it was being fixed up. And the temple president didn't understand my mother's zealousness, and that's putting everything very mildly. But he told her at the time
That's why you chose the word "a new regime." I noticed.
he told her that.
I think Krishna had a plan behind this whole thing, as we're going to hear. Yeah.
Said that the boys, my mother cut all my brother's hairs into sikas. My mother had 8 children, 5 sons and 3 daughters, and most of them were with her at the time. So she cut their hair into sikas. We were wearing tilak. My mother was so eager, Anuttama, that she gave all of us Sanskrit names even before we were initiated. And so the temple president was like, "No, they can't wear sikas. You all can't do any of that because you're not initiated." And so thus ensued a real conflict because, we were eager. Now, what the temple didn't know was that at this time we were writing Prabhupada, and Prabhupada wrote us back. And Prabhupada was such a gentleman in Anuttama that he addressed my mother in the Sanskrit name that she had chosen.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. And
so the temple president said, "You can't use these names." And Prabhupada wrote back to her and used the name in his own letter.
Yes, he did.
And sometimes people wonder how broad-minded was Srila Prabhupada. Thank you for making that point. That's a great example.
Yes. And so we had a rough time in Anuttama. So many details. We got arrested. My mother was put in jail just for trying to worship in a Hare Krishna temple. And so by this time, my family was up in arms. They said, "Wow, isn't Lord Jesus Christ good enough for you? Why do you have to go to this cult thing? They don't even want you anyway because you're black." So we had to deal with all of that. And this was 1970, 71. There were hardly any Hare Krishna temples. And so we didn't know what to do. And Prabhupada was in India. So people have to remember there was no email, no internet, no Twitter, no Instagram, nothing, all this instant, communication, no. If you wrote a letter.
Your kids are laughing, but I know exactly what you're talking about. Keep going.
So then we finally came to the conclusion after the arrest, and my mother got out of jail. It's a long story behind that, but that we needed to go and find some place where we could serve Krishna.
Yeah.
And remember now, there were hardly any Krishna temples in 1970. We didn't know where we were going. I called my first husband, bless his heart, and he said, "Listen, I will take you wherever you all want to go." He just wanted his family back. And by that time, I had 1 child and was pregnant with a second. So he came from Chicago, bless his heart, John Hairston, and drove us all the way. We didn't know where we were going. My mother, who was a praying lady, literally prayed on the highway and said, "Krishna, which way should we go?" And he would say, "Go west." And so she would do that. She said, "Which way should we go?" He would say, I'm telling you, and this was crazy in Anuttama because you had little children in the car. My oldest brother would have been about 5, and my oldest brother that was with me was 14, a 12-year-old, 5-year-old brother, and a 2-year-old brother.
There was there's 6 or 7 of you at that time.
Yeah, and then I had my youngest daughter, Radharani, who was Angie Radharani at the time. She was 2, and we were all in that beat up old station wagon going to God knows where, just following this prayer. And at some point, my first husband said we should go to Arizona, but then my mother said there's no temple in Arizona as far as we knew. So I'm going to skip a lot. We ended up in Dallas, Texas. How that happened had to be, you all know by now, providence. And so I can imagine, Anuttama, when we came to the door of that temple, we must have been a sight. I mean, we had been on the highway for days. We had all these little children. I was pregnant. And so we knocked on the door, and the temple president was like, "Whoa." His name was Snoka Krishna, bless his heart. And he heard our story a little bit, and then he ran and called Cleveland. And Cleveland said, "Don't let them in, they're troublemakers." So he came and he told us, "I'm sorry you can't stay here." But my mother said, "Look, Prabhu, we're trying to be devotees. And you see, I have all these children. We have nowhere to go. We don't know anybody. We've never been here. He said, okay. You all can stay here one day only, because tomorrow Prabhupada will be here.
Oh.
That was it for us. I mean, can you imagine Anuttama? We didn't know where Prabhupada was. We thought he was in India. And he said, tomorrow Prabhupada will be here. That was just like Krishna all over the place, right? And so we were just happy. And so the next day, Prabhupada, they told Prabhupada, they said, Prabhupada, this black woman from Cleveland is here. And he sent for her. And my mother sat in Prabhupada's office for 6 hours while he did a variety of different things. And then the next day, she saw his secretary at the water fountain. Now, Dallas had just acquired the new temple. It's a big parsonage that used to be a Catholic school and this and that. And so they were fixing it up to be a temple. And
the one they have now on East Gurley Street in East Dallas. Great.
So the secretary told Prabhupada, he said, my mother had given herself the name of, I remember this, Vasudevia Dasi. And he called her that because I'm telling you, that's how Prabhupada addressed her. And he said, Prabhupada is doing initiations tomorrow. And so my mother said, we want to be initiated. And so he told Prabhupada sent back Anuttama, and he said, ask her how many does she want to be initiated? Now, my mother put all of our names on that list, if I remember correctly. And then Prabhupada said, well, the younger ones could get initiated when they're a little older. And then there's a picture of my mother at Prabhupada.
You are. So that's your mother standing with Prabhupada?
With Prabhupada and my youngest brother, Aaron Chaitanya.
All right.
So then she called my stepfather, who had stayed back in Cleveland to work and send us money wherever we would land. He got on a Greyhound bus and came quick. So the next day, which was Radhastami, we got initiated. And Anuttama people later told us that people were telling Prabhupada, don't initiate us, because they didn't know what our sadhana was, and we weren't associated with any temple, and they didn't know who we were, and blah, blah, blah. But thank God, Prabhupada initiated us.
The whole family, all of you.
He named my mother Bhumata Devi Dasi, my stepfather Rupchand Das, me Krsnanandini Devi Dasi, my two brothers Asutosh Das and Supanu Das, and the other ones he said he would initiate when they got older.
Didn't he tell you if they're where I see a spark?
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. So Anuttama later, I'm in North Carolina now with my oldest daughter. She's kind of had a plan to get us all here at some point. But later I came to the temple, and I had seen Bir Krishna Maharaj maybe 20 or 30 years after I was initiated. And he told us, he said, Krsnanandini, I was there and people were telling Prabhupada not to initiate you all. But then when I came about 9 years ago to North Carolina to be present at one of my grandchildren's birth, we went to the temple. And at the temple, guess who we saw? Anuttama. We saw that old temple president from Cleveland, and he was giving class. He gave class on that verse that says, wherever there's Krishna, the master of all mystics, and wherever there's Arjuna, the supreme archer, there will certainly be victory, opulence, extraordinary power, and morality. That was a class he was giving on. And I looked at him and I was like, I know him. And
how many years later was this?
This is 45 years later. 40
later. And you had not run into him at all?
I had not run into him, no. And so I later after class, I said, Prabhu, you know me? And he was kind of vague. And I said, Bhumata. When I said my mother's name, he remembered. And he said, Prabhu, I am so sorry how I treated you and your family. And it was a very earnest apology. And he said, if I could take it back, I would. And I said, Prabhu, I wouldn't let you take it back. I said, because of how you treated us, we ended up in Dallas, Texas, getting initiated by Srila Prabhupada on Radhastami, the same day that Radha Kalachandji the beautiful deities were installed. I said, you can't take that back.
So there was an initiation and the deity installation.
And the deity installation, same day. In fact, they installed the deities after the initiation, which they said usually Prabhupada did installations first. And later when I saw Tamal Krishna Maharaj, bless his heart, he said, Krsnanandini, you're like an auntie to Radha Kalachandi because you were initiated before they were installed.
We're getting some comments. People out there that listening are getting goosebumps and all kinds of other physical manifestations of happiness hearing this wonderful story.
Yeah. So Anuttama, there are a lot more details to this story, but if Krishna allows, I'm writing a book, and it's called Fanning the Spark. Because what that devotee told me when I saw him in North Carolina, after he apologized, he asked me, he said, Krsnanandini, do you know the rest of the story? Oh, I'm sorry, sweet. You're okay. Okay.
No, you're perfect.
Okay. And I said, I thought I knew it because Krishna had told me that, about that. He said, well, Sasramut Maharaj told him that they had really heavily advised Prabhupada not to initiate us. But Prabhupada said that wherever I see a spark of Krishna consciousness, I must fan it.
That's beautiful.
And so,
and I think the same person that was inspiring Prabhupada to see that spark is the same person that answered your mother's prayers, whether to go north or south and east and west. It's the same person that had that president in Cleveland said, be mean to these people. I'm not going to tell you why, but there's a plan that we're working on here. That's a wonderful, wonderful story.
yes.
And that is as Venkata put up a comment here. He said that's the most amazing story that he's ever heard in Krishna consciousness. So it's wonderful. Well, let's flash ahead now because we're all, and I think everybody here is going to pre-buy at least a dozen copies of your book. So if you need any advanced publishing costs, you got a lot of fans out here already.
Well, I appreciate that. The book is tentatively titled Fanning the Spark, the story of a girl, her gurus, and the gifts they gave the world.
Wow, that's beautiful. That's really beautiful. Maybe you can release like chapter at a time to it. Might hit the New York Times best-selling list if you. We'll get any marketing people out here listening to this. Please contact Krsnanandini soon afterwards. Yeah. Well, let's flash forward a little bit because your introduction to Krishna consciousness is amazing, but your continued work in helping devotees around the world is similarly important. Tell us about the Grahasta Vision Team. We mentioned we held up the book Heart and Soul Connections. Put a little plug in for the book again.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about the book and the team and some of the work that the GVT does.
Well, I am just so grateful, Anuttama, to be a part of this wonderful team of inspiring and inspired Vaishnavas. Archana Siddhi, Karnamrita, Mantrini, Tamohar, Uttama, Partha, Sri Devi, Chintamani, Jagannath. We have these awesome devotees who have just come together to strengthen the family life in Praharna. Did I miss my beautiful God sister there? And Anuttama, you're part of this. And so we have been working on initiatives for the past almost 15 years now to do workshops and seminars. And the cream of our heart, though, is this book, The Heart and Soul Connection, a devotional guide to marriage, service, and love. Because part of the instruction that I was given in a dream by Srila Prabhupada, and Vajalila and Ekavir are newly added members, but there's such a plus to our team, and we just work so well together. So we wrote this book that talks about communication in marriage and parenting and finance and how to do your sadhana and how to prepare for marriage. And it's a realistic book. It's very practical. It's very devotional. We put our hearts into that book. For 4 years, we wrote that book together. It's a collaboration. And it's all over the world now in 5 languages. Anuttama, Russian, Italian, Portuguese, Chinese as we speak, and of course English, and hopefully not too far Spanish.
And Spanish, I believe, right? Spanish is probably the other language.
And the nice thing about it, my husband is a Muslim, Tariq Salim Syed. He has a chapter in that book. And it's a chapter, his particular chapter is the roles and responsibility of grihastas, which goes to show how much my husband has really dedicated himself to supporting any God conscious work, but particularly the work that we're doing with the marriage and family.
Actually, I was going to go ahead right at this time and ask a question of Tariq.
Yes.
Sitting just behind you, Tariq, salam alaikum, Prabhu.
Alaikum assalam.
Nice to have you here on this. When I was first given this opportunity to interview Krsnanandini, I didn't realize I was going to get the whole clan. So I'm really excited with everybody. I think we probably could have done 1 hour with each family member and found enough interest to stimulate a lot of participation. But we'll go with the 1 hour we have. We're going to try to touch base with everybody a little bit. Tariq, tell us a little about the work that you and Krsnanandini have done with couples in Cleveland. But what are the kind of things you've done to work with couples there through your institute and other things you've been doing?
Well, we started out by a young lady asking us to give assistance to her engagement she had with the young man. And that was the very first time we worked with a couple. As a couple, we worked with a couple. And as a result of that, we started getting interested in learning more and doing more to help couples. And that's what we started doing, doing different trainings. We already knew things to do. We already knew how to organize. We both have been leaders organizing things. And the most significant was a lady in a red dress came to a men's group that I was facilitating called Man Talk Sessions. We would meet every month and we would invite the public to come to our meetings. And twice I put an article in the newspaper. And one of these times she came and I asked her, I said, how did you know to come here? She said, well, you put an article in the newspaper. So she called us a couple.
This is a men's group you're describing, and a unknown lady in a red dress came.
Yes.
Is this you're leading up to a joke here, Tariq, or something? The raccoon and the bear went into a bar. Go ahead. The lady in the red dress came to the men's group. Okay, we just want to make sure we're all hearing this properly.
So what we would do, we would have where the general public could come to a gathering. And this one was called What Women Want Men to Know. So we as men, we wanted to hear from the women. So my wife was one of the speakers, and a lady who just passed a few months ago, the main speaker. So afterwards, the lady talked to me, and then about a month later, she called me to invite us to a gathering of interreligious people, work together to form an organization in Cleveland called the Greater Cleveland Covenant to Strengthen Marriage, and to do whatever we could to help marriages in the Cleveland area. And we accepted that invitation and went, and we've helped hundreds of people in Cleveland. And that formula that we ended up getting a $200,000 grant to design a particular type curriculum that we've used all over Cleveland and elsewhere. And joined it with what we did with the Vice novels, joined it what we did with whenever we would have we had Black Marriage Day celebrations once a year. Churches would allow us to come in. Couples would come from everywhere, whether they were Black, we have Black and white couples too. And we just have been working in the community in a variety of ways that have had us work with former prisoners, et cetera, et cetera. We're thankful.
That's great. Thank you for that. And I know that the work you've done over the years has a cumulative effect because you're helping people understand themselves better, have better relationships, stronger marriages. It brings down the divorce rate. It means more kids growing up with a family that's not broken. So those are things that actually will last for years and years and actually into future generations. Krsnanandini, one thing that Tariq mentioned brings up a thought to my mind. And you mentioned this again last night in your Tawako conversation, that you've had a very you have a very broad-minded perspective on things, and you're very outspoken about the need to partner with other people and other organizations. And frankly, sometimes in our larger community as Hare Krishna devotees, sometimes there's a fear even of doing that, or there's there's a tendency to not want to associate too much with people that are outside our communities, and maybe it's going to have a negative effect upon my spiritual commitment. And you seem to kind of blow up that whole concept, because you certainly are a very Krishna conscious, a very spiritual lady, very successful person professionally, and as a counselor, and as a wife, and as a mother. But sometimes people think like that. So can you address that? What do you say to people? They say, well, I don't know if I want to associate with people out, quote unquote, outside people. What are your thoughts on that?
Very strong thoughts on that, Anuttama. I love the question. I don't know how many people realize that when Srila Prabhupada was born, that his father took the newborn Prabhupada, Abhay Charan, to a Muslim imam and asked the blessings of this imam. He said, would you bless my son to be a lover of God? Now, what lesson is that for us? Here is a staunch Vaishnava, Gaur Mohan Dev Srila Prabhupada, took his precious new baby to a trusted other God-conscious person and asked their blessings. So I think for us, and we only know that story because Prabhupada told us. So I think for us to understand that Krishna is the seed-giving father of all living entities. And he loves every single living entity with a love that has no bounds, no fathoms. I don't know where we get off thinking that God loves Hare Krishnas better than he does Muslims, better than he does Christians, better than he does atheists, because he does not. He is a father, a loving father who loves all of his children. And his goal that Krishna wants from us is to cooperate together to serve him. And so the more we become instruments to do that, the more pleasing we are to Krishna. And that was Prabhupada. Prabhupada broke all kinds of boundaries. He wanted Muslims and Christians and everybody. He said, you don't have to change your religion. And so the mark of a good Vaishnava is that we help other people become better in whatever they're doing, better Christians, better Muslims, and accept that they help us become better, because Krishna is working through all of us to accomplish his ends. So the goal here now with Lord Chaitanya's movement, if we study Lord Chaitanya, he broke all the rules. Because this is a very special time. He broke open the storehouse of love of God. And he didn't say it was just for Vaishnavas. It is for all of his children and those of us who are willing to be vehicles or vessels for that. And we shouldn't think we're better than us. Anuttama, there's some Christians who got me beat by a long shot how they love God. I've met them. There's some Muslims that I would trust with my life. I've met them. And then, I'm sorry to say, there's some people call them Vaishnavas that I don't have that same trust for. Because what is the standard of their God consciousness and their commitment? And that's what we should go on. So for us to be examples of how to love God and how that love is all pervasive and all inclusive, the thing you can know about a godly person, they are always trying to figure out, how do I include the others? They are not trying to figure out, how do I leave you out? They are trying to look at Prabhupada, study. Even when devotees went bad or when they, drunkards, he was trying, how do I include them? Bring them in, bring them back home. God is calling. So that's the move that a real spiritual warrior, Bhakti Tirtha Swami, bless his heart, my true God brother, he manifested the same goals and personalities and ways, and he showed us how to do that as well.
Thank you. That was beautifully spoken, and clearly your life, you've been dedicated to that same ethic. It makes me think, I try to listen to a lecture every day from Srila Prabhupada, and many, many times Prabhupada talks about how it doesn't matter what particular religious tradition you're following. The question is, are you awakening your love of God? he said that again and again and again. And sometimes, I see we tend to put that aside. This is not the age of love and trust. It's the age of quarrel and hypocrisy, according to our scriptures. And there's a tendency to become very quarrelsome and critical of others instead of, as you've just advised, go in our own hearts and work on ourselves, and don't be so quick to put boundaries up and say, we're the special people and they aren't. And I really appreciate what you said, because I also have many Muslim friends and many Christian friends, and I sometimes feel the same way, that I know Christians who I feel are more deeply committed to trying to love God than I am. And I admire them, and I try to follow in their footsteps and learn from them. So that was beautiful, the way you said that so well. I'm going to later on get that little piece clipped out there. That was 2 minutes. I was going to ask you in a joking way to say, Krsnanandini, I'm sorry I haven't found any topics you feel strongly about yet. Let me switch topics here, though, because a big part of the work that you do has been with couples in Vaishnav circles. So what, in your experience, are the greatest challenges that you see for Krishna conscious couples and families?
Wow.
And maybe to put a positive on it, maybe the second half of the question, what advice do you give to them? So maybe, put in the and the solution at the same time, and that works better.
Yeah. I think the greatest challenges for couples trying to negotiate serving God together is giving up selfishness. That's one. And also having a misunderstanding, wrong paradigms. What is marriage? What is relationship? What is family? Should I love somebody? Should I show my love for somebody? I think that in the very beginning, this idea of detachment from material things and material, it was so strong that we had a near understanding of what detachment means. And therefore, sometimes we became too detached from our spouses and from our children. And, love, as Radhanath Swami, bless his heart, always says, that the need of the spirit soul is to love and be loved. This is a crucial need. It's the food that we live off of, actually. This is why the world is in such trouble today, because real love is so rare. But the idea of not being selfish, like Lord Chaitanya said, who am I? I am Das Anudas, servant of the servant of the servant. And for spiritual seekers to actually take on the mood of, how can I serve you? How can I serve my husband? That's my mood, that should be. Not what can he do for me? How can I serve my son? How can I serve my daughter? Because serving them is serving love. That's what Krishna is. And so we should be in a competition in relationships to see who can serve the most with unselfish love. So I would say that those two things mainly, the wrong paradigms, like what is marriage, what is family, what is actual love, what is actual relationship. And then this selfishness, which is a part of Kali Yuga, that song, what have you done for me lately? And I do my own thing. And if this pleases me, then girl, you do you. No, you don't do you. You do love. You do Krishna. You serve Krishna to everybody you meet. And especially those in your immediate, because Krishna is so kind, Anuttama, that we ask them every day, the sincere servants of God, whether they're Christian, Muslim, Vaishnav, we have to allow us to serve him. And then he gives us the opportunity. He said, okay, I'm going to give you a husband or wife or child. And they may not quite be what you would have, but
what your mind maybe thought yeah.
So now let me see you serve them, and then you'll be serving me. So that's
a very important point. So one instruction you're giving is that when we marry, those of us that do, the majority of us will, we should be very careful to not fall into what you said is kind of a immature sense of renunciation, that Krishna is there and my wife or my family is over here, but that people are gifts of Krishna. Yes. And my love for him, part of that is going to be shown in how I love and take care of my family. I don't know why we didn't get that for so many years. It's kind of one of those you know, Americans, we're so philosophical. I love it when I travel around the world and I'll say, you know, as we say in America, duh. How we didn't make that connection is
and this is supposed to be the most loving philosophy that you ever want to run across. I mean, if you study our scriptures in Anuttama, the love that was shared between the devotees, they would hug one another, they would give their lives for one another, they would appreciate one another. It's just, yeah, duh.
You know, I want to read something that you quoted in your article in the Heart and Soul book. Here's my third plug. Those of you listening, please.
Y'all better get to
the book. And just to clarify, there's no kickback involved whatsoever. We're promoting it because it's a great book. But you quote a letter from Prabhupada, quite interesting one in the context of your and Tariq doing counseling in the Cross Division team. Prabhupada wrote in 1971, the two marriages recommended leaders, the two marriages recommended by you may be performed at that time as well, but only after having sufficiently counseled the respective devotees. This marriage business should not be taken as a farce, but it is a very serious matter. Recently, so many couples have been cast adrift by the waves of Maya's influence. That is hard to check, but still the devotees must realize the responsibilities of household life. So this is a message that you've really carried and continue to do so. And I'm sure that's going to be one of the themes that's going to come across in your book.
Yes, the importance of getting premarital education, getting help from mentors who are qualified and who care to help you negotiate and navigate relationship before you get married. Because you should do everything you can before marriage to understand what is marriage, what are you committing to, what to expect, and those kinds of things. And all of those things are covered in premarital education.
So that would be one of your main...
That would be the top most recommendation.
Don't assume you can do it on your own, but get some help before, during, and after.
A wise person will always get help. And a wise person will always have good counselors.
I remember as a younger temple president in Denver when I was there some years ago, and I noticed there was this tendency when a couple would come together in Krishna consciousness, and there was a sense of, okay, now it's you and me kind of against the world. I understand you better than anybody else. You understand me better than anybody else. And there was this tendency to isolate, which, you know, in the beginning of any relationship, there's kind of a sense of euphoric, there's this, you know, honeymoon kind of a phase, which wears off rather quickly. And if the relationship doesn't go deeper, it breaks. So your advice to seek advice and seek mentors is very, very important.
And also, Anuttama, to be aware that a good marriage takes a good village, a good community to support it. And we all have a responsibility to support marriages, good marriages. It benefits everybody when marriages work out. You know, the children, the community, everybody is benefited when homes are not dysfunctional or broken. So we need to have communities that, in fact, when we do our courses, Anuttama, we recommend that everybody take those courses, even renounced people, because you need to understand what it takes to support healthy, happy marriages in our community so that we can make progress.
And I know in Canada now, they've had a policy for several years that if you want to get married in a temple, then it's mandatory you go through premarital training. You with the lessons of the temple. Yeah. So I want to, and Tariq's raising his hand, but I want to go to the next generation since they're all sitting there demonstrating what patient children you raised. I don't know if that's because there was so many that everybody had to wait for dinner longer than somehow or other paid off well. But I'm a little curious from the kids side. And of course, you're not kids, you're all adults, and some of you have your own children like that at this point. But you know, coming from a family, an interfaith family, with a mother so deeply committed to her spiritual tradition, to a father deeply committed to his spiritual tradition, and all the interesting things that come out of an interfaith relationship. And meanwhile, you know, they're telling you on Saturday afternoon, hey guys, you know, you got to cook spaghetti yourselves because we're going to go help another family. And I'm sure a lot of that came up too. You're learning how to balance yourselves and sharing your parents. What would your advice be to parents how to raise their kids? You know, coming from this, from, you know, thinking back as children and now adults, and seeing you've got parents who've given their lives to helping other families. What kind of advice would you give to parents how to raise kids in the crazy world we're living in today? And there's a whole lot of you there, so whoever wants to go first, go ahead.
So I think
maybe introduce, just say your name real quick so we all know.
Sure, Shama Vallabha.
Well, Sham Prabhu.
Haribo. So, I mean, there's a whole lot I could say, but I think one of the most important things that Mata did for us was to give us a foundation of Krishna consciousness, God consciousness, because that her constantly chanting, listening to Srila Prabhupada, we're hearing these lectures that changed the atmosphere. That was just, it was a different feeling being at home with that and then going outside to play with our friends or other houses even, you know. So the most important thing I would say is to just let your children hear the Krishna conscious songs or God, whatever, you know, whatever it is, let them hear about the glories of God through the stories, through the Krishna book, through just hearing Srila Prabhupada's voice. Now I hear Srila Prabhupada every day because every day Mata used to play a different lecture or some song that Srila Prabhupada sang every day. So that was embedded in us. So
you have some sisters behind you who are smiling and shaking their heads.
So that foundation,
this experience, yeah.
Yeah, so that foundation was just an amazing thing. And actually that helped, that saved me today. And now I'm initiated disciple of Gururaj Swami because of her loving concern and care to make sure that we grow up to be God conscious people. That foundation you lay, even if your kids go astray, they have something strong to come back to. And that's what she's given to me, to us.
Very interesting. And sometimes kids do go astray for a while. That's especially in the modern culture. It's based, people want to go out and experiment a little bit. But as you said, when the foundation is there, they come back. I see one of your sisters there would like to make a point, please. And tell us your name.
Krsnanandini Devi Dasi.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. One of the things that for me was very helpful along the way is that Mata made Krishna consciousness every aspect of our lives. It was Krishna conscious. She would say, Krishna, where's my keys? And Krishna would be responsive. So he always felt personal and present and available all the time. And Mata is a fun parent. Like she would sing songs, or like we would get up early in the morning and it was joyful because she was like, come on, we're doing this for Krishna. And we're like, yeah. And that carried on to like how I parented my sons and how to make it through adversity. We would always get up and read the scriptures, and she respected our position, respected what we got in class. Each person would have a time to express themselves in class about what they got out, what they learned, what resonated with them.
Every day.
Every day.
Every day we got a chance to do that.
So I'm hearing a house full of a lot of love, setting a nice example, making it fun, engaging everyone, really respecting the input of all of the children. Those are some important lessons. In terms of respecting all who's poking her head around behind you right now.
Well, I'm Krishna Jeevanine. What I really appreciated is everything she did was out of love. And that's definitely the advice I would give to parents. Even if you're angry, you have to think, am I reacting out of anger or out of love? That was something that I would say mom did really well, is always reacting out of love, everything because of love. So that's definitely the advice I would give.
And I would totally, I'm Ganga. I would totally echo that. That's the very same thing I was thinking. I think for all of us, we associate Krishna with love because of the way that Mami taught us about Krishna. So I think one thing told me that Prabhupada said the best way to teach children about Krishna is to love them. And I think she did that so much that when I think of Krishna, I think of love and what that love looks like. And so for me, I think the lessons that I got about Krishna through these little actions that like you should be just describing, everything was with love. And so for me, I think we all carry that with us, that Krishna is love, because of how mommy demonstrated that to us. So
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. Because sometimes parents kind of slide into the do what I say as opposed to do what I do type of mode of teaching, which can really, really, really backfire. So that's beautiful. So in other words, all of the wonderful things that you've been talking about, families and raising children, we've just had visual and audio proof that it works. So this is not some theory that we're talking about here. That's great. Krsnanandini, another thought comes to my mind. In the interview last night, you just touched upon a point that I'd like to go in a little more deeply, because you are a great woman, a very spiritual woman, a wonderful mother, and at the same time, sometimes devotees get into this consciousness. Well, maybe Krsnanandini can do that because, her mother was hearing Krishna. My mother wasn't necessarily hearing Krishna. She got initiated. My life's not that. I'm not such a superhuman being. But last night I heard you say, if I understood you correctly, you said, sometimes I talk with Krishna. Usually I talk with Radharani, and sometimes I'm a little mad at them. So it seems you also, and I deeply believe this because I've worked with you for years, you are a very saintly person, and you are also a vulnerable human being who sometimes maybe asks Krishna, what's going on here? So help us understand that a little bit.
So, yeah, I think that Prabhupada has given us so much of this, and he helped us to understand that God is a person. He's not just some abstract wind or energy or light. That God has feelings, although there's feelings. He has things he likes, and things he doesn't like. He's a person, and he's accessible. And so, for me, that's always been really something that resonated. And even in the darkest times, because we had some dark times. I talked to the Lord like he's a person. And when I was in India for the Ayurvedic treatment that I underwent, I actually had an experience with lizards while I was there. And, I like lizards, of course, right? But we had a lot of the house where I was staying, and I had a conversation with Krishna. I said, Krishna, I actually won't be able to stay with these lizards. And everybody was saying, "Oh, Michael, they're harmless. They eat the kids, don't worry." Whatever it is, I couldn't do the lizard. And so I was talking to Krishna, and I kept saying lizard. But when I talked to Srimati Radharani, the mother who understands, the lizard problem was solved. And so that was that. Other times, with this public cancer thing, the Prabhupada again has helped us have such a good understanding of, I haven't questioned Krishna a lot, but I went through some excruciating things that I wouldn't want anybody, not even my worst enemy, to have to deal with. And so I did say, Krishna, wow, I didn't know that this was going to have to be, And so I talked to him, and then, he just helped me to deal with it. And one day I went into the deity room in Vrindavan, because Prabhupada said, if you ever have problems, go talk to Lord Balaram. So I went to Lord Balaram and I was crying. I said, Lord Balaram, as we know, is the Lord who is spiritual strength.
Somebody's phone might be muted.
We're having some problem with the audio. It's not as clear as it was until just a couple minutes ago. So if anybody in the room has their phones on, it may be causing some problems. If everybody can just turn off their phone, especially if anybody is live streaming anything right now.
Okay. So anyway, I went to the temple and I prayed to the Lord. I said, Lord, I don't know, I can't do this anymore. And the Lord revealed to my heart and people, we need to talk to God, and you can even talk angry, but just respect. That's what I tell my children. Sometimes you may get angry with me, but you don't disrespect me. So if we have that move with Krishna, you can say, Krishna, I'm so upset now. I don't understand what you're doing. I know you're God. Please forgive me. I don't want to offend you, but I am just upset. You could talk to him. He's a person like that, but be respectful, you know. And so the Lord revealed to me that he didn't want me to suffer, and he loved me, and he told me to take pain medication, and he told me don't be so hard on myself, because I have a tendency to do that sometimes. And that was a message that I got from the Lord. So God is a real person, and we have to approach him like that, just very respectfully, and know that he's the topmost person. We don't play him cheap. But if someone loves you, you can approach them.
I'm trying to unmute here now. Real quickly, we're getting kind of close to the end of the hour, but just, Tariq, can you just share a couple thoughts about particularly interfaith couples? Because the two of you are really you're an example of that. You're probably the most famous interfaith couple in ISKCON, and I'm sure there's many, many more, and in the future there are going to be many, many more. Any particular advice that you both give to an interfaith couple?
Well, we know other interfaith couples too, and love. When you love someone, you want them to what they call actualize. You want them to be the best them they can be and become. And then our leader discourages us to try to convert someone into Islam. That's supposed to be their own choice of where they go. And what I noticed, if you just support people in the good they're trying to do, many of us are strategically located to help each other, to make this world a better world. If everybody was Muslim, it wouldn't be such. If everybody was Hare Krishna, it wouldn't be such. Because, we work with so many people, Jewish, Christian, Baha'is, and we can think of them as we call the names. And it's been very enriching and very inspiring to the people who look at us. We were teaching a class one day, and one of the students looked at us with shock, and they said, wait a minute. Are y'all two different religions? And we said, yeah. She said, it's hard to believe, because you can be on one side of the room, she can be on the other side. It's like y'all understand each other, what y'all about to say and do. So this working with couples has been a desire of Krsnanandini, and that's why I had my hand up. She got a dream from Srila Prabhupada, and I should let her tell you how that dream worked. But I want you to know that when she told me about the dream, and it had to do with her not having a husband, I'm a mathematician, so I want to know if they have anything to do with you got your eyes on me so you can fulfill that dream. But after that dream, after we got married, it was after we got married, she still came to me. She said, I'm still puzzled about the dream. I can't understand it. And we were married. She had a husband, so it wasn't that. And so she should tell you about the dream, because it's very important of really how we got started. It was already in her soul that she had a mission to fulfill that Prabhupada asked her to do. So I yield to her.
Krsnanandini, we just have about just under a couple minutes left. Could you share that dream for us, and any other final comments you'd like to share as far as this this conversation goes?
Yes. Well, this was well before, I want to say in about 1979, shortly after Prabhupada left the planet. I had a dream, a vision that he came back. And he was giving darshan to devotees from all over the world, like Europe and Africa and America. You could just see it was devotees all over the world. And Prabhupada, in his normal compassionate self, he said, how are you doing? And so devotees one by one started telling this story, and they were not nice stories. There were stories of marriages gone awry. There were stories of children hurt. There were stories of so much pain. And I was just a little happy in the dream because I was sitting not too far from Prabhupada. So I was like, okay, I'm sitting next to Prabhupada, And then he looked at me and he said, you showed them how to have a real Krishna conscious marriage. And Anuttama, I was floored because I was divorced at the time. I didn't know what a Krishna conscious marriage was. And I just felt so unqualified. But later on, I just surrendered. Maybe a few years, I went in my deity room, I did Dandavats, and I said, Lord, Prabhupada has given me this instruction. I don't know what to do, but I surrender. And after that surrender, Prabhupada started putting all the pieces together, the husband, the training, the this, the that. So surrender was key for that. And I see that in my travels around the world, that dream, I was able to see that it was true, that there was a lot of hurt and suffering in the families, and that Prabhupada wanted something to be done about that. And my final thoughts would be that just know that Prabhupada wanted us all to be happy. And that is not a dream. That is the reality, that if we accept this principle that there is a God who loves us and who loves everyone, and he's given us a few simple guidelines just to live our lives, then we can be happy with each other. We can be happy with the earth. We can be happy. And that should be our goal, to be happy, not as some artificial thing, but as proof that serving God makes you happy.
I think you are walking, speaking, living, thinking, loving proof of what you just said to us. And I know that all of those beautiful people behind you, their lives have been blessed because of you. And we heard some testimony to that. I certainly feel my life's been blessed by your presence. I'm looking at the chats during the whole session. I'm waiting for somebody to ask a question. There's no questions. It's all thank you for your inspiration and love. We love you, Mata. This was so beautiful. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. No questions, because everyone's just, their hearts are effusive and wanting to show their appreciation. So just want to let you know that that's the comments that are coming in. And again, I know every time you give a talk these days, you're hearing that, from everyone. So thank you for being with us on this broadcast, and we look forward to opportunities to do more in the future. Thanks to all of those beautiful children who are now parents of children and soon to be parents of children. And some we didn't get to hear from all of you, but you're all wonderful people, and we're very, very grateful you took time to be on with this morning. I want to thank everybody for joining. Those of you that have been watching different events on the GBC SPT program. The next event is follow up. We can learn from one of the junior partners in comparison to Krsnanandini. One of the partner teams of the Grahas Division team is Partha Prabhu and Uttama Dasi.
Wow.
Yes, and they're also that also got everybody some more smiles back there. Another very beautiful couple, and they're based in Canada. They've traveled all around the world to do mentoring and training and counseling, and they will be on the same time broadcast tomorrow, 7 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, and then going up online so people can catch it later. So just a final request, ask everybody, please share this page and follow and subscribe to our YouTube channel, GBCSPT. Thank you very much. All right. Thank you. Krsnanandini and Tariq and family, Ki Jai. You're wonderful. You give us all hope. You give us hope. You give us faith. You give us enthusiasm and confidence. And we're all very, very grateful, each and every one of you. Thank you.
And give Rukmini a hug from her god sister.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Well, you should have